Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of the Logistics Lens. Glad you could find time to check us out. Today, I've got a friend that I worked with at DLA, Rear Admiral retired Doug Noble, who at the time that I worked with him, he was actually the executive officer to the director of DLA, and I was in the J3, but I retired at the end of 17, and Admiral Noble continued on. And Doug, I appreciate you being here. I don't know what happened. I stopped at 06 and you went to 08. I'm not sure what happened there, but congrats.
Thanks, Kevin. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on. And I think the jury is still out in terms of what happened. You are a successful podcaster, and I'm still trying to kind of find my sea legs here in post-military life. So I wouldn't don't sell yourself short, shipmate. I think you're doing very well for yourself. It's great to see you again. Those were some fun times at DLA, and maybe we'll talk about some of that on the talk today.
Yeah. Actually, I had a podcast session with Admiral Harnacek, who was our boss during our time at DLA, and it was a great session. Really enjoyed talking to him. But hey, you went on to actually obviously continue to serve. You're now in industry. You work at KPMG.
Correct.
And managing director of Defense and Intelligence. Is that the right title?
You got it. Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
So what I like to do is just kind of start off by having you give your background, from when you came in the Navy and worked your way up to, as I said, to Rear Admiral, and then kind of your transition into the industrial base, and then we'll kind of dig into some meaty questions. But if you could just start with a bit of a background, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to. Yeah. It's one of those stories that when I look back on it, it's kind of funny how it all fell into place. Makes me think that there's a plan out there for each of us. I grew up, went to high school in a small town outside of Chicago, about an hour up in the northwestern Illinois. And I remember coming home from school one day, and my dad, who was not, he had been in the Air Force Reserves in the early '60s, but had really just had not made a career of it. He had done his enlistment and then moved on to civilian life, and so we didn't really have a military background in our family. Certainly didn't have a Navy background, but he knew some guys from his company that had been Naval Academy graduates, and got to talk to them. So I came home from school one day, and he's like, "Hey, what do you think about the Naval Academy?" Honestly, I hadn't given it much thought, but as I looked into it, it was a great opportunity to pay for college, and I didn't know what I was getting into, but I took a jump at it. And then in my senior year in high school, they had these, and I think they still do this program, but you could go as a high schooler and spend a weekend and just kind of shadow a plebe as they go to their classes on Fridays, and then hang out with them on Saturday, and then and then you go home, and so you could get a feel for what it was like. And I didn't really think about this until many years later, but the weekend I went down was March Madness. I think it was the first weekend of the tournament, and this was David Robinson's plebe year, and the campus was electric. They had this is back in the Stone Age, so we had transistor radios and those sorts of things. But folks were listening to the game on their radios, and everybody's cheering. And I'm like, hey, this place is kind of cool. This is fun. So in hindsight, I realized that weekend experience wasn't really representative of what plebe year would be like.
And I think he went on to a little bit of greatness too with the Spurs. I think he did pretty good there.
Yes. And it was made for a couple of good years of basketball as a student as well as a spectator. But so I got there, still didn't have a plan to end up in logistics or be a supply corps officer. And when I showed up, as you go through all sorts of medical things to get your commission, as you know, and I couldn't be a line officer because of color blindness. So the Navy said you can join the Staff Corps or the Marine Corps, and I just couldn't see myself as a Marine. I have the highest respect for those guys, but I don't think I could do what they do.
Yeah.
And so I found myself going into Supply Corps, and it has just turned out to be just such a huge blessing. It's been great. So very happy with how that panned out, and I just never could have guessed it at the time.
Yeah. Well, you obviously had a tremendous line of assignments there, and again, when I was there, I think I was there 14 through 17, if I recall.
That sounds right.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
So I was working in the director of logistics, and you had been in the J3 before, hadn't you? And then you moved down to the XO position.
Correct. Yeah, I had started in what was then the strategic programs part of the J3, the Directorate of Logistics, and in particular, I had this project called Strategic Network Optimization (SNOW), and our mutual. Well, I think he might have transferred out, but the J3 at the time was Major General Ken Dowd, and he used to
Yeah.
call me the Snowman. And he's like, "Hey, Snowman, what are you doing?"
That sounds like him.
It does good. I'm glad my impersonation still holds
Yeah.
up. I hope the general appreciates it. But it was so I worked on SNOW, and that was a department wide effort to try and optimize distribution networks across not just DLA, which was the big piece of it, but also with the services. There was a component of also trying to integrate better visibility of supply. I mean, some of these themes, I think in a little bit maybe we'll get a chance to talk about,
Yeah.
kind of where we are today in technology. And so it's funny to see how, how does the saying go? History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes a lot. So this idea of end-to-end visibility, and if we could see into the service inventories, then DLA could do a better job or be better calculating at what inventories we needed to hold. And then there was like an infrastructure piece where we were trying to get that network sized right, get the inventory sized right, and then knock down all the get rid of the infrastructure that was unnecessary. So I did that for about a year. And then one day, got tapped on the shoulder by the Army colonel who was then the director's executive officer, and he said, "Hey, when's the last time you deployed?" And I hadn't deployed. It had been a few years at that point, and then he just left. And then I said, "Boy, nobody really asked that question for no reason." And a couple days later, I found myself up in Admiral Harnachek's office, and he said, "I think it would be really good for you to go lead the DLA support team in Afghanistan." This was in 2014. So I ended up doing that for 6 months, and that was a great experience. I mean, it had all the challenges with any deployment of family separation and kind of the things that make it tough and are not fun. But from a professional development standpoint, I learned so much. I prior to that and prior to my time at DLA, I think coming up through the ranks as a Navy supply officer, and I imagine logisticians across all the services have a similar vibe going. But you kind of think you get to a point where you think, hey, I am the master of my craft. I know logistics. I am everything, all that in a bag of chips. And when I got over to Afghanistan and saw what the other service logisticians had to do, predominantly the Army, but the things it takes to support ground operations and worrying about GLOCs and worrying about bottled water supplies and all those sorts of things. We're worrying about fuel, quite frankly. And you compare that to a supply officer on a ship. I never had to worry about water because the engineer had evaporators that made the water for us. So it was if there was a water problem, it meant that my scullery wouldn't work and I couldn't get the dishes washed. But it wasn't my job per se to stock the water. That's maybe kind of a silly example, but it was things like that that deployment kind of forced me to really open my eyes and see this much bigger world of logistics than what I had been used to from an operational Navy perspective. So it was great. And the other piece that it opened my eyes to, and this I think was particularly relevant at the time we were in. That was during the time that we're really focused on the drawdown from 100,000 troops in Afghanistan to get down to a smaller number. And DLA, I probably spent 2/3 of my time was in the disposition services part of the world, which for folks that don't know, that's kind of we would joke that that was like the scrap yards of DOD. So Fred Sanford and Sons for folks that are old enough to remember the TV show. But we had yards all across Afghanistan that would take things, and as bases were being closed, as FOBs were being closed, and units would be turning in all this equipment, things that it was not cost effective or not worth the time or treasure to try and send it all the way back to the States. If it was things like white gear, like office desks and refrigerators and those sorts of things, if we could get those out into the economy to help stimulate the local economy, we were doing those sorts of things. But then also for all the things that needed to be scrapped up or demilitarized, we had cutting crews, we had big heavy industrial equipment that would grind things up, and it was a pretty close to 24/7 operation all around the country. And if you had told me, before I went out on that deployment that I'd be, involved in the scrap business, I would have looked at you like you had three eyes in your head. I just never could have anticipated that.
It's still a big operation. I mean, a lot of people probably don't realize that about DLA. The folks at Battle Creek and around the world that run the disposition services, Mike Cannon, it's so funny. Mike and I were in the J3 together, and here he is, for years now, been running the disposition.
Yes.
And they have a huge mission. And that's something that you don't really get exposed to if you're sitting, behind a desk at headquarters, working on an important project, right? Snow was an important project, but a completely different experience. It really helped round you out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's just one of those, there's lots of things like that, but that's one of those areas of supply chain, if you will, where if you don't, you don't think about it until you need it, and then if you wait till you need it to think about it, it's kind of too late. Hey, I've got this thing. How do I get rid of it properly? How do I dispose of it? That can be a big deal. So it is a crucial part.
When I hear you talk about your experience over there, what I'm going to remember from all this is that you said the Air Force logistics officers were the best that you came across. Is that correct, Admiral Noble?
Close. We'll allow it.
Okay. Hey, I want to talk about when you were in the director of logistics job at DLA when you were the J3. You came back. You came back from Afghanistan. Did your penance, so to speak, joking around, of course, when I say that, but XO duty and then other duties after that. But when you came back to DLA, you knew the enterprise very well, which in that position of being the J3, man, what a huge bonus that is to have had the experiences that you had. So when you served your time there, and did you do 2.5 years? How long?
3 years as the J3.
Okay, so during that time period, you had a chance to determine what you wanted to invest your time and effort and resources in. What were your top 3 priorities when you were the J3?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Well, and before I talk about the priorities, just to flesh out the thought a little bit more, as I was just talking about, that deployment was great to kind of see the delivery of DLA effects forward and see how that all came together. Yeah. But then my last year after the deployment, when I came back, as we've kind of alluded to, I got to be the executive officer to the director, and that was fantastic because then you could really see at the highest level, all the decision making and coordination that happens across the J codes. You could kind of understand, to your point of knowing the agency. I just felt like that, in some ways even more than the deployment. The deployment was outstanding, but the time as the XO, when I came back, later, I felt like I had a sense of, hey, what is the boss going to be worried about? What do I need to be feeding to the second deck to tell the director and the vice director? Those sorts of things. So it was a wonderful foundation.
And you were very good at your job. Like I said,
well, I had no excuses. I guess it was like, if I screw it up, it's all, or when I screwed it up, which I know I screwed it up from time to time, it was all on me, and I couldn't blame anybody else for throwing me in the deep end.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, I can see that that really rounded out your knowledge of the enterprise and DLA. For people who haven't had a chance to work in DLA, what an unbelievable organization and phenomenal people. Huge mission,
Yes.
global mission, great things get done by DLA. And sometimes they take a rap because they have a very challenging job, and we'll talk about that. But when you did move into the J3 position down the road, having the background that you did, the experiences that you did, and knowing the enterprise pretty darn well, what did you focus on? What did you say? Okay, I'm going to have 3 years here more than likely. Here's what I want to get done.
Yeah, so I had kind of three big rocks, if you will, that I think I spent the 3 year, and that's just not wasn't 1 year each. There's no connection between three and three, but just kind of worked out that way. And ironically, two of the three I think were kind of forced on me. That was me just dealing with reality, which I feel like that's another just fact of life. Is you wake up every day and you've kind of got the plan for the day, and then that never survives first contact with everything else. And so the first contact that I didn't survive was so when I got to DLA. This was May of 2021, and we were really just still kind of coming out of the COVID response. So the agency, from an operational standpoint, was very focused, and they did tremendous work supporting whole of government requirements and across medical, PPE, vaccine distribution overseas for the military, and then other equipment as well. I remember having conversations about ventilators and getting those delivered and all sorts of things. So that had been a key focus of the area, or of the agency rather, and that worked out okay, in part because if you recall, a lot of things operations didn't cease, but they slowed a bit, so that kind of the normal business of DLA had settled down a little bit, such that the agency could really focus on this very unique pandemic response mission set. And then there was all the other very important things, but kind of ancillary part of just kind of what I would call the administrative piece of taking care of our own people and tracking them. And we would track when folks if folks caught COVID, making sure we're doing all the due diligence for notifications and tracking folks that they had been in contact, so people could take the right precautions, all that sort of stuff. So in hindsight, it's sometimes I think about that and I was like, yeah, I kind of forgotten we did all that, but that does take a significant amount of bandwidth from the team and from the agency. And so the first focus was just how do we go from kind of that posture, if you will, and get back into normal operations. And for things that we hadn't done for a while, for example, where we do DLA does, as you know, Kevin, we do our service days, annually, semi-annually. It kind of varies with the tempo of leadership and whatnot. But we will have these recurring, periodic, very big sessions at the 3-star level to get together with the senior leaders and senior logisticians from Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and I think they've started with Space Force now, and Coast Guard as well. And with the DLA leadership, and kind of talk through the strategic issues with those individual partners. We hadn't done that for a couple of years, and so just getting the muscle memory back of we had DLA has a tremendous strength with the civilian cadre, because that does give a lot of continuity and a lot of stability to the enterprise. But PCS orders and whatnot for the military didn't stop completely during COVID, and so we would have new generations of military, from 06 all the way down to the junior officers that maybe it was their first tour at DLA and they had never done a service day before. So things like that, where we were just trying to get back to basics, if you will, and do kind of our normal order and carry out the plan of the day, as we would say in the Navy. So that was kind of the first focus. And then my second priority, which also wasn't one that I had really planned on in advance or had expected, was to get back to a better balance between readiness and financial stability. And the reason we focused on that was, if we went back a couple of years prior to my arrival. So you may remember, folks may remember, around 2018 when Secretary Mattis came out, and he had issued out a guidance to all the services to increase readiness rates, and he was specifically focused on tactical aviation and set an 80% mission capability goal. Well, that's not just supply, as you and I know. I mean, there's lots of pieces to that, but there is a parts piece to that equation. And so DLA had leaned in and made investments in inventory to be able to support those service readiness goals. There was a little bit of a perfect storm that then hit. If you fast forward to COVID and operational tempo slows down a little bit, many of the items that the kinds of things that DLA would be stocking, particularly to support aviation, but for all the weapon systems, where it wasn't strictly limited to just aviation items. They have long lead times. So this material is starting to deliver. I've got vendor bills that I need to pay for the material that they've delivered. But the material is going on the shelf, and I'm not selling the things that I thought I would sell, or I'm not selling them at the same level I thought, and so I'm not generating cash. And so we had a very intricate balancing act, and it was kind of all hands on deck to make sure that we had to keep the machine running, and we had to keep buying new and replenishing the inventory and do all those things to keep moving forward and keep the supply chains functioning, but we had to be very cautious towards cash solvency, where we couldn't, we couldn't be writing checks that we didn't have enough money in the bank to be able to cash those checks.
I'm sure you got plenty of help from folks above OSD. They were saying, "Hey, your cash levels, you need to take a look at that." A lot of people may not realize that there are very strict upper and lower control limits that affect the working capital fund.
Yes, there are, and there's very good controls on it, and we watch that very closely. It's part of what makes it challenging, though, is I mentioned that that we have these very long lead times, and also other factors that demand patterns could be sporadic, and there's not always a very fast moving environment in terms of some of the components, that they don't break that often, so they don't move that much. And so what happens when you kind of aggregate that all together, it takes a very long time, sometimes even years, for cause and effect to manifest itself. It's the I tell the example of, it's like driving an aircraft carrier. You could spin the wheel, throw the rudder over as hard as you can, and then you just kind of sit and wait while this massive machine slowly starts to turn. And once it starts turning, I mean, look out! I always kind of went back and forth. I didn't know if I should call a DLA an aircraft carrier or a bulldozer. I guess I could call it either, to fit the service audience. But when you got that machine that is the Defense Logistics Agency, when they were lined up, full speed ahead, steady on course and speed, they could plow through anything. It was magical. But we are not very, agility is not the first characteristic that you would ascribe to and that's not a dig on them. That's just a reality of it. It is a huge organization, 25,000 people, global footprint. So it takes time to kind of coordinate actions and see the cause of effect. So back to your point of, when we would take actions to either, increase investment, decrease investment, we're going to throttle up our burn rate, slow down our burn rate, and then to be able to see, okay, when does the needle on the speedometer actually start to move? It's very challenging to be able to see that and then communicate that, not just to OSD, but our mission partners in the services that are like, hey, what are you guys doing? What's going on? Mm-hmm. So that was kind of the second big rock that I would say I spent a fair bit of my time on, and then. And I think we were successful in both of those. So we made our way through the transition, and I think we did get to a much better place in terms of balancing that fiscal solvency and readiness. The last big area and this was one that I did, was kind of a passion project of mine, if you will, was how we could use technology and data and just better integrate things into our processes, integrating not just data but also the automation. And one of the like a C story that reinforced that for me was I'd been the J3 for just a couple months, summer of 2021, and then we had the Afghanistan withdrawal that happened. And of course, DLA, just like across the department, we stood up, went to battle stations, had 24/7 watches, and we had our folks at the DLA support teams supporting Central Command, also in Europe and Africa. I mean, there was a global effort as all the pieces that is the Joint Logistics Enterprise were really hitting the accelerator to deal with this retrograde of people and refugees. And as we were early in the process, I saw that it was so dynamic and things were changing so quickly that our battle watch captains and our team processes for updating a spreadsheet and then going in and building the PowerPoint chart for the morning briefing, it's just not sustainable. I mean, we sustained it then because we had to, and we managed to pull it off. But if you looked at that, that example and then tried to extrapolate it out to say, okay, how would this work if we had a truly global conflict? We're just not gonna, we would not be able to keep up with it. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough desks. And the decision makers, our brains couldn't keep up with that data flow in order to be able to process it and make decisions if you have things happening, simultaneously in multiple areas. So really wanted to focus this on, okay, how do we digitize our data? How do we get everything, integrated so we're looking at real data on the screen. We're looking at a single source of truth, so we're not we're not necessarily arguing, but we're not confusing ourselves where I say, hey, Kevin, my spreadsheet says 5, and you say, well, Doug, my spreadsheet says 6, and I'm like, well, wait, when did you print your spreadsheet? Oh, that's from yesterday. This is today. And all the many things that we've all seen that we don't, we do to ourselves and don't realize we're doing or don't intend to do it. So, how do we get ourselves that single source of truth? And then and I don't know if I really anticipated this up front, but what was the biggest challenge, I would say, was the kind of the human change management of getting ourselves to use the tools and use the capabilities as we unlocked them. The muscle memory was a powerful thing, and as we would try and build visualizations, as we try to build logistics common operating tools, there would be times where if we ran into a stumble, maybe we had a problem where, oh, hey, this data source is down and we can't connect to it, where all well intentioned, but the team at the action officer level would be tempted, and they would try to say, well, hey, sir, for this brief, we're just going to go back to PowerPoint because we know how to do that. And you had to be very ruthless and diligent to say, no, I mean, if it's broken, it's broken, and that's not good, and we need to fix it, but we need to force ourselves to use these new technologies. Yeah. So we started that with Class 3 fuel, and we had visualizations and dashboards. We could see our fuel posture around the world. And then we moved into Class 1, which was subsistence, food, and there we were able to get visibility of not only where DLA had inventory in locations around the world, but they also, the folks up at Troop Support were able to build in to see visibility of material in the transportation pipeline, and also what our prime vendors could do. And I think that was about the point in the movie we were just starting to play around with we did some pilot projects for Class 9 repair parts right as I was leaving. But as we were kind of doing a crawl, walk, run, and trying to build out the capability to see across a supply chain and see kind of that end-to-end picture. It's been exciting. I know you've had General Simmerly on this podcast, and to hear him talk about data acumen and tech acumen, I think I'd like to think that what we were doing has set a good foundation for where the agency is still trying to go today.
So when I see General Simmerly next, I'm going to make sure to tell him that Admiral Noble thinks that the whole thing started with him, and he's just riding on your coattails. Would that be a good statement for you to make?
I heard that a little differently in my head, but
no. So all joking aside, I mean, it is amazing what they're doing now inside DLA, and General Simmerly's vision and the impact that he's having on the enterprise with all that. But yeah, you go back to when you were there and you saw that there was a need, doing things on the back of an envelope or on a spreadsheet That's just not where we're at. That's where we cannot afford to be.
Right.
So I want to ask you, uh, okay, so that's kind of some stuff that you focused on while you were in the hot seat there at DLA. But now when you're in the position that you're out, out in industry and stuff, you obviously are keeping track of what's happening, across government and I'm sure in some of the other, industrial base, commercial industrial base. How do you see this emerging AI movement? I mean, you cannot have a conversation these days or turn the TV on without AI coming up. I mean, it's a topic that the average American talks about.
Yeah.
It's not just a defense thing or a Department of War or whatever. Everybody's talking about AI. What impact is this going to have, in your opinion, on our ability to do our job as logisticians?
Well, it is a huge area. It's a great question, and I probably spend a fair bit of every day thinking about it. Either at a personal level, how can I better use AI to do what I need to do, but then also the kind of the bigger questions that you're talking about how this affects logistics at large, how this would affect the military at large, all those sorts of things. I have a couple thoughts of it on it, and I do have some areas that I'm not sure the right way to really think through it. I'll come back to that, but I think the goodness of AI. I mean, where I see tremendous power and benefit is where it can quickly automate and eliminate the noise in so many things that we have to deal with today. I mean, I remember stories not unique to DLA, but also in my time in Navy, where we would have a system, you would have the business rules, it would trigger, the system was designed to do X, Y, and Z, and then it would trigger alerts for the human to step in and process the exceptions when those alerts would happen, and then case after case of the work of the people, the human, just getting inundated with too many alerts that they couldn't, they just couldn't process them all, and so it becomes a white noise thing where it's meaningless. If everything is, if all the lights are flashing, I don't know which light to focus on. So where
Yeah.
AI, where we can be smarter and more disciplined on that, and really, use the AI to figure out, hey, where can I, where do I need you, Mr. or Mrs. Human, to jump in and do something, versus, hey, we can just let the machine sort this out and it'll figure it out. I mean, I think there's a very broad range there, from the kind of low cost, low impact, low risk. Hey, don't worry about it. And even if the machine screws it up, then we'll fix it and we can tweak the settings and so it doesn't screw it up tomorrow. Versus the things that are high risk, high cost, could be detrimental to life or property, and you would say, hey, nope, I'm not giving the keys to the robot on that one. We're going to still micromanage that, but working our way across that spectrum so that we can free up people for the kind of the higher level analytical functions, and to tie it back to the previous C story about the where we're building the visualizations and not building PowerPoints anymore. We didn't really, I mean, AI was a thing. It was certainly not as ubiquitous as it is now, and we're just starting to maybe talk about it. But I do remember talking to the team and saying, like, hey, I don't want you building a slide, because I want you to spend all of your time thinking about the problem, not just kind of collecting the data. So that's a place where it can help us. I also think there's tremendous power in data analytics and really identifying patterns and things that maybe
Yeah.
would be very difficult for us to find. We had an example once where we were trying to stock some components for these were difficult to procure, long lead time components for an aircraft weapon system that was going through a depot modernization, and we could not figure out how to properly forecast the demands for these things. And again, this was a few years ago, so I don't know that I would call it a full up AI, but we were able to apply some machine learning to it and let some algorithms work on it and come back with the finding that where we connected it to, hey, these aircraft and it was there in front of us. You just kind of couldn't see the pattern of the dots for all the dots. You couldn't see the forest, you couldn't see the trees because of the forest. But these aircraft were on an 8-year depot modernization schedule, and once we kind of had that epiphany, the light bulb went off, and you filtered it to look at an 8-year demand pattern. Then we had a much better forecastable outcome. So that's an example of something that like AI could, we were able to figure that out, but it took some smart ops research folks, a couple weeks to do some math and figure it out. I think AI nowadays would find that in about 5 seconds and say, hey, here's what I see.
It is absolutely amazing what can be done these days with off-the-shelf software to identify those patterns and become, a lot more predictive concerning requirements rather than us having to be in a reactive mode. And so with that capability that exists, and I say this without poking anybody or anything, but I've heard recently from some senior leadership within DLA that their forecast accuracy is hovering down in the 60% range, and they know they've got an issue there, and clearly, that's not where we want to have our levels for readiness. So, how is it that we can have this capability to be able to better predict, future needs? What needs to happen to fully implement those capabilities into the Department of War, whether we're talking about inside DLA or inside the services that are facing their own challenges too? What's the barrier that we're facing? Is it financial? Is it change management? Is it policy? What's keeping us from being able to take advantage of those capabilities that we know exist but are not yet fully embraced?
Yeah, I think it's, depending on how I count them, it's maybe there's kind of 2 or 3 things that are thwarting us. One, I mean, there is just a size and scale problem. So DLA has 9 million national stock numbers that it's responsible for. The services also have, DLA has the biggest chunk of it, but there's also a universe of for the service inventory control points where they have similar challenges and problems for their forecast. So there's just and a lot of those have little activity or no activity. So it's this very wide, potential problem set that, imagine playing whack-a-mole that, only pops up, a couple moles pop up, but it's spread out across, 9 million wide, and how to figure out which one I need to whack on the head. So that is a challenge, but I think AI is suited for things, at scale, once you can figure out how to feed it. And that to me is the other problem. It's the data integration and probably the data quality. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about data quality. But right now, the AI capability is only as good, or any of the predictive capability. But these machines are only as good as one. Can we get the pipes connected up to them? So the service maintenance process, there's a lot of those challenges that DLA has with improving that forecast accuracy. You trace it back to, well, I thought I was going to, the plan was, and it's not that the services are wrong either from a maintenance standpoint. When I made this schedule a year ago, I was going to induct, these 10 items for repair in the next year, but then things change, fact of life, whatever the case may be. There's all those perturbations that take place. So the schedule that actually gets inducted or executed doesn't match completely, and so then the ripple effects from that well, I was forecasting this, but I forecasted X, but you actually did Y. I think that really is what hampers us, and we don't have good connection between those systems today. And so because we don't have that, we can't quickly respond to update our planning cycle. Does that make sense?
Let's talk about that for a second. This flow of data that you're talking about. So what is it? It's 2026, right? We have these amazing capabilities with software. We have lots of data, both historical data and real-time data available. What is the challenge there in getting access to data between our many systems that we have inside DLA, inside the services, inside the industrial base where we have to get lots of our parts and equipment from. This flow of data, what's the holdup there? Why are we having these challenges to have access to clean data flowing from system to system?
Well, there's a couple challenges that I would posit. I mean, many of our legacy systems are just not built to kind of support this new capability and the new infrastructure. And so, across the logistics community, as DLA and the services, as organizations are modernizing their logistics infrastructure. I mean, that I think just is a process that takes longer than any of us would like. We'd like it to move faster, but there is a little bit of the building the plane or upgrading the plane while we're flying it. We don't have the luxury of saying, hey, everybody take 30 days leave. We're all going to just stand down the entire Department of War and come back next month and we'll have new systems installed. A business might do that. I'm not saying that they always do that, but we don't. We have to kind of be able to sustain current operations while trying to implement the next new thing, and that is a challenge sometimes. So I think that can be make it take longer, make it more complicated. I do think there is a personal, like a human kind of emotional element to it. It is somewhat justified, but also unjustified. It's I may be nervous, and I don't know if I give Kevin access to my data, what's he going to do with it? I think the part that's unfounded. So some of that is just kind of maybe a natural nervous reaction that we need to just kind of push ourselves through. I would say that there is a valid concern that if you're going to have my data, that you understand it, because I have seen that where well-intentioned, we've connected up data, we've provided data visibility, and I've had this happen to me, and then next thing you know, you're in a briefing and somebody says, well, hey, so and so said X, Y, and Z, and you're like, holy cow, where did you get that from? And they're like, well, that's what your data says. And says, no, you're reading that wrong. That's not what that means. Yeah. And then they would say, oh, I thought that's what that meant. And so it's not malicious. Nobody's trying to cause trouble, but it can be just a simplification to just say like, oh, well, we'll just connect, make all the data visible and Nirvana will break out. You got to make sure that people, and I think, and I have not talked about this, so I hope I'm not off, but that's kind of how I interpret when General Simmerly talks about like data acumen. It's understanding what that data means and understanding how to interpret it and how to apply it. Case in point, we had this was one of the challenges we had to work through when I talked about the integration of the subsistence class 1 data for being able to see what was in our vendors' inventories. What did they have on hand? The danger with that is that inventory, not all that inventory is reserved for us. It could be, there could be a box of chicken tenders there, and that chicken tenders, we could buy it, or Walmart could buy it, or Costco, or whoever. It was whoever placed the next order for chicken tenders. And if I'm out there on my ship and I'm starting to run low on chicken tenders, and I look back and I say, oh, they got plenty on the shelf, I don't need to worry about it. That could lead me to bad decision making because I'm not interpreting the data correctly. So there is that's another challenge, I think, back to your question of like why we struggle to pull this all together.
Yeah, so I'm hungry now, so thanks for that. I appreciate that very much. When I had my conversation with General Simmerly, who I just give so much credit to him and to the enterprise for what they're doing, but he made the statement, AI is the new gunpowder. I mean, that just made the hair on the back of my neck stand up when he said that, because I think he, along with so many of the rest of us, see that the use of data and the use of artificial intelligence, we have so much capability there, but there are concerns, some I'm sure very valid, about where is this going to take us, and am I going to lose my job and be replaced by AI, or how do I trust the data? I know I've got dirty data in there. I'm going to be making these decisions with knowing I've got dirty data or whatever. There's a lot of concerns, but the capabilities, I think, are pretty obvious. And I know across the services and certainly at DLA and kind of whole of government, it feels like we're just really starting to get traction. And I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we almost probably can't even imagine where we're going to be. But I think Admiral Harnachek called you a big 10-pound brain guy or something. He gave a compliment to you when I was talking to him. You're kind of a bit of a futurist, I think, in a sense. You do think ahead. Where do you see us going with supply chain and scrim and cyber? Where are we going to be 10 years from now? What is the logistics enterprise going to look like?
Yeah, so I see a couple areas where, if I dream of my George Jetson, futuristic, what's it going to look like? I think the things, and I would maybe put them in two buckets. There's kind of like the physical piece, and then maybe a more of a mental piece, if you will. And the mental computational piece is what we're talking about now, where we will be much quicker to be able to respond. We will have, ideally, we're going to have we will be all be integrated. We'll have our data cleaned up. And we'll be able to just kind of act with much better speed and relevancy to respond to the things that we need to respond to. Use our people, most effectively as possible, and then let the machines kind of just run on autopilot for all the things that they're perfectly capable of handling. And we've talked about that a little bit, so I'll move off of that. But that's where I see AI and those capabilities taking us. Then there's and we haven't really talked about this, but on the physical side, just the two areas that excite me: autonomous systems, autonomous capabilities. So from a logistics standpoint, you can think of warehousing. I got robots that could receipt stow issue that could do those functions, and I don't need people in the warehouse. And they can also do kind of the recurring routine maintenance, if you will, maintenance of the inventory projects that we do that are ongoing. We have some projects that we're working on now where we've got robots that can go around with an RFID scanner, and they can do your inventories for you. So to make sure that you're taking inventory for auditability concerns, you can use that automation rather than having to have a warehouse worker with a clipboard and a pencil walking around. So that's a big piece. And then a different piece, but also kind of in the logistics realm, is the capabilities that I see in the future with advanced manufacturing. And I see kind of and DLA is looking at that as well. The services are also, we're very much partnered with them, or DLA was very much partnered with them, and I'm sure they still are. But there's a couple use case categories you could think about for advanced manufacturing. There's the kind of the forward. Hey, if I'm out forward and I've got some small advanced manufacturing capability with me that's like a deployable kit, and I have some battle damage, can I have a piece of gear that I could fix that it's good enough to get me back to safety, but it doesn't, it's not, if you have it's maybe not fully up to spec, but in a life or death situation or in an extremis, it'll kind of patch it up till I can get that done. Who knows? There's a lot of engineering and work that needs to go through that. But as a logistician, I just think about how that capability could help. But then also, we have a huge problem across defense logistics, across the military logistics, with obsolescence and vendors that just no longer make things with aging weapon systems. And so to the extent that we can have the technical data, this connects back to your data question. We got to have the tech data to be able to do it, and we have to have the own the intellectual property, or at least maybe we don't have to own it, but if we have the right to pay a royalty on it or do something to access that intellectual property, so that then when a widget breaks down and nobody makes that widget anymore because it's for a weapon system that's older than you and I, like a B-52, then then we can go
barely older than me, by the way. But go ahead.
Yes, but we can make those things and pump it out, and we're not stuck in the position that we sometimes find ourselves today, where vendor, nobody makes that anymore. I just can't get it. So that's where I see kind of future capabilities really coming to life in the logistics space.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a few questions here, speed round kind of stuff. So, still talking about the future of logistics. Amazon can deliver stuff by drone. Are we doing that now? When are we going to do it?
We've done some capabilities. I know the Navy did a test with that. I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, they tested some drone delivery capability to a submarine in the Pacific. So that capability is it's out there. It's being tested. Obviously, we're not at full scale on that, but and I think you also have to think about all the implications of that. I don't want to. I may sound contradictory here. I believe there's a lot of we get a lot of pushback on folks will say like, hey, Amazon does X, why can't you guys do X? And then we'll push back and say, well, we're not like Amazon.
Yeah.
I think we're a lot more like Amazon than we want to admit, and there's huge areas where we need to be just like Amazon and do those things that you're talking about. But there are military unique situations where that we have considerations we have to worry about that Amazon doesn't. So
Yeah.
does Amazon have to worry about jamming or interdiction of their drones? They have to worry about porch pirates maybe, but they don't have to worry about someone coming in and hijacking the drone signal and stealing that sustainment for themselves. So those I think those are, and I'm not a technical guy in that aspect, but I can just imagine those are the sorts of considerations that the services are trying to figure out as they figure out how to best implement this capability. That's probably too long of an answer for a speed.
No, it's good. It's good. Yeah, it wasn't lightning. It wasn't lightning round, but that's okay. Okay. So DLA has a part that's desperately needed over on the other side of the Earth. Can we put it in our rocket launcher and get it there in 6 hours, point-to-point delivery using rockets?
That's a great question, and I know we're looking at that as well. I was not involved with it directly, but I know from conversations with the folks out at Transcom, when I was in the J3, that Transcom had engagements with industry in the space industry and was looking at hey, what's the feasibility of rocket cargo? What's the cost? What are the performance parameters? All that sort of stuff. So it's one of those that I struggle a little bit to wrap my head around because I'm like, holy cow, how critical is that part? But I think. How do I want to say it? I think as the technology continues to improve and we see the cost per pound or however they measure the cost of space flight, that continues to just get more and more affordable, which that's amazing in itself to see how those costs have come down over time. You can envision a situation where you'd say, hey, that's what I'm gonna do.
Well, I happen to have some pretty good friends in the Space Force and have had a chance to talk to them about some of these things, and that is underway, and it appears to be something that we can look forward to maybe over the next 2 to 3 years. So interesting. Your thoughts on that? Okay, so along the space topic, warehouses in space. DLA going to have some warehouses in space so we can do maintenance in space.
That's a great question. DLA is the provider for the services, and we always talk about the last tactical mile. So there's a handoff to then the services take it into their organic, sustainment or logistics organizations and work those deliveries. DLA does well, with the exception of fuel and some inventories on ships. For the most part, DLA doesn't have floating warehouses at sea. We kind of hand that over to the Navy. It might still be on our books, but we let the Navy manage and hold that inventory. So would we give our parts to the Space Force and let them have it up there, or would we keep it down here? I don't know. That's a good question. I think the economics and the mission parameters would probably drive that. Maybe we'd have a DLA depot on the moon before we had them out in space.
That's under discussion.
But the other technology that I would wonder about, and to me, and again, this is kind of, I have no idea what I'm talking about, so this is just like speculating on my front porch. But the rapid distribution capability from rockets and whatnot, and pre-positioning up in space, like, does that win out versus, we talked previously about the additive manufacturing advanced manufacturing. So
Right.
in the future, maybe we don't need to have a warehouse in space, because instead we just have those, what were the machines on Star Trek where they could make whatever, and it
Oh,
just
yeah.
manufactured it in the machine, like
Yeah,
magic.
you could
So
have whatever meal you wanted or whatever part you
exactly.
needed, all out
So
of the same
there'll be no
machine.
more MREs. You'll just have this magic widget that makes you an MRE.
It's really fun, I think, to kind of envision, where we're going to be. Guys like you and I that have been around for a while, to think about where we were,
Mm-hmm.
right, and where we've come and where we're going to be. It's, I mean, we really work in a very interesting community with a bunch of really smart people who really give their all day in and day out. And I know you well enough to know that you did. And I'm curious, as I start to wrap up here, who had maybe the most major impact on what your line of thinking and your leadership? Who do you look back on and say, boy, that person or that event really caused me to grow up to who I am today?
Well, I would, we've mentioned him before, and I would have to say it's Admiral Harnachek. I did not, hadn't crossed paths, didn't know the Admiral as I was coming up through the ranks, but there was kind of two guys that were just foundational to my career trajectory. So the first was when I was a lieutenant. I was a lieutenant on the USS Independence. She was the forward deployed aircraft carrier in Yokosuka, Japan. And our supply officer that I worked for was a guy by the name of Phil Valeni. And he was just a great leader, super smart guy, knew the business from a technological standpoint of supply support to aviation, and but was also just a great leader, and really was in tune with his people, and a true mentor, and all that sort of stuff. And he and Admiral Harnachek were around the same vintage and had come up together. And so, just as an example, what a great mentor Phil was, years after both of us had left the ship, I get a call out of the blue from Phil Valeni that says, "Hey, you need to get on the calendar with then Captain Mark Harnachek, and you should go work for him at the Naval Inventory Control Point." I didn't know who this officer was. I eventually did get to go work for him, and then that kind of, as they say, the rest is history. So what was instrumental, kind of to get back to your question, I got two opportunities to work for the Admiral. One was, when he was the commander of what was then the Naval Inventory Control Point in Philadelphia. They managed that's kind of like, if you would imagine DLA, but Navy specific. It's all the high-end components, repairable items for the Navy and Marine Corps, submarines, aviation, surface ships, you name it, and just managing that part of the business. And he was a very smart, very focused, but also had this tremendous ability to kind of find the right point of level of detail and simplify it down so that folks could execute. I oftentimes, we've probably all seen it, where you get the smartest folks in the room, but they're too smart for their own good, and they get into immense detail, and your eyes just start glazing over, and you can't you lose the story thread, and often not just losing the story thread, but kind of ancillary details that aren't necessary. That the Admiral he could hone in on what was important and say, hey, this is good enough, roughly right. Let's be directionally correct. If we're 85% right and we move out, that's in almost every circumstance, that's going to be way better than refining until we're 100% right. But because by the time we get to 100% right, something will have changed back here. Now we're going to have to start all over again. So it was just great to see that that kind of mentality and that approach to business. And then on the I already told the story, but then later on, when I came back many years later and had the chance to work for him at DLA, I didn't have at that time we were kind of winding down from deployments across I think across the department, but certainly across the Navy, and I had just hadn't had the opportunity. The timing had just never worked out to do a deployment, so I figured that was just an experience that I wouldn't get. And so then to have him, out of the blue, kind of call me in one day and say, "Hey, I think you should go do this deployment." My wife wasn't very happy with him for a couple of days, but I think all is forgiven now, and
Yeah.
that turned out to be a tremendous
Yeah.
opportunity.
He is such a phenomenal person, Admiral Harnacek, just super smart, like you said. And I remember him using the term roughly right,
Right.
from my time working with him. Well, hey, Doug, listen, man, thank you so much. I want to have you back because I know we have a lot more we could talk about. It's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for everything you did in uniform. It was phenomenal working with you and staying in touch with you all this time. I appreciate your support in NDIA and a number of other things that we kind of get to stay connected with. But thank you for everything that you did in the Navy and that you continue to do now on the outside. I think we're both pretty darn happy to still be supporting the DOW, and
Yes.
I'm proud to be working alongside you. So thank you very much for your time.
Well, thanks, Kevin. Right back at you. Yeah, it's a great mission. There's a great bunch of folks, folks like you, folks like the good admiral that in uniform and then out of uniform. Just it's so gratifying to see familiar faces and know that we're all kind of working together on this, one team, one fight. So it's been fantastic. It's been great talking to you today, and I'd love to come back. So let me know anytime. This was really fun.
Okay, sounds good. Well, hey, thanks to everybody who tuned in. Admiral Noble is just a great guy. If you ever get a chance to talk to him in person, he'll always have some sea stories ready, like every Navy guy always got sea stories, right?
Right.
But they always have a good point to them. So thanks for tuning in today. Again, we got lots of great people coming up. I hope this is serving the community and that you're getting value out of it. If not, write me. Tell me what we need to do to adjust, and we'll do it. But thank you for your time. Doug, thanks again, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Take care, Kevin.